My name is Margaret, but people call me Maggie, and I'm 59. I thought I had raised my daughter to know the value of love over money, but the day she inherited $10 million, she changed before my eyes. One morning, I came home to find my suitcase sitting on the porch like a piece of trash. Emily stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her voice sharp. "You don't live here anymore, Mom. This is mine now." I bent to pick up my bag, and in my hand, I felt the cold weight of my old house keys. They had unlocked every door of my life, yet at that moment, they meant nothing. I clutched them tightly, as if holding on to the family I thought I still had. People say money changes people. 7 days later, I would learn just how true that was. Before everything unraveled, my life had been ordinary, but it was filled with love and sacrifice. I was born in a small Midwest town, the kind where neighbors still waved from porches and church bells rang every Sunday morning. Life wasn't easy, but I believed in hard work and quiet dignity. My marriage didn't last more than a few years. Emily's father left when she was only 3. I never remarried. Instead, I devoted myself to raising my little girl, even if it meant giving up parts of myself along the way. I worked 2 jobs for most of her childhood. During the day, I clerked at the local grocery store. At night, I cleaned offices. My hands were always tired, my back ached, but when I saw Emily smile, the weight lifted. She was bright, curious, and full of questions. I wanted her to believe she could be anything she dreamed, even if I could barely pay the bills. We didn't have much, but I tried to create joy in small ways. Every birthday, I baked a cake from scratch, even if it meant staying up after a 10-hour shift. At Christmas, I saved coins in a jar, stretching them into presents wrapped with care. When Emily got her first bicycle, bought secondhand, she squealed so loudly the neighbors laughed. For a moment, all the sacrifices felt worth it. I kept a family photo album that became my treasure chest. Inside were pictures of Emily with pigtails, her first day of kindergarten, and our silly Halloween costumes. I glued in little notes and ticket stubs, proof of our life together. That album was my reminder that despite our struggles, we had love. I used to think one day Emily would inherit not just the book, but the values inside its pages. Our neighbors respected me because they saw the effort. Mrs. Prist. Parker across the street often said, "Maggie, you're stronger than most men I know." The church ladies would whisper about how devoted I was. I wasn't looking for praise, but those words helped me through the hardest nights. They gave me hope that Emily would grow up to appreciate everything we had built with so little. When Emily was in middle school, I started to notice flickers of something different in her. She admired classmates who had brand new shoes or the latest phones. She once told me, "Mom, someday I'll be rich, and I won't live like this." I brushed it off as youthful dreaming, but sometimes her eyes lingered on things, not people. She wanted more than what I could give, and I feared she resented me for it. Still, I pushed forward. I saved every spare dollar for her education. I skipped meals, skipped haircuts, even skipped doctor visits so Emily wouldn't have to skip opportunities. When she wanted to join a school trip to Washington, D.C., I worked overtime until my feet swelled. Watching her board that bus, her eyes shining with excitement, made the pain invisible. Emily's grandmother, my mother, was the opposite of me. She had worked her way into some wealth through careful savings and investments. She lived frugally, but she was proud of what she had built. She adored Emily, often slipping her little gifts, silver bracelets or crisp bills tucked into birthday cards. Emily's face always lit up more at those gifts than at my homemade cakes, though I pretended not to notice. When my mother passed away, I grieved deeply. She was the steady anchor in my life. I knew she would leave something behind, though I didn't know how much. I assumed, maybe foolishly, that her inheritance would be for both Emily and me. After all, I had been the one by her side, caring for her in her final years, arranging doctor visits, and cooking meals. But my mother, in her old-fashioned way, saw Emily as the future. She wanted to give her granddaughter a strong start, something she thought I could never provide. The will revealed that everything, her home, her savings, her investments, would pass directly to Emily. $10 million. I sat in silence when I first heard the number. My mother had never spoken of it in detail, and I hadn't imagined a sum could be that large. At the time, I felt a quiet joy. I thought, Emily will never have to struggle like I did. I believed this money could be a bridge between us, a chance for both of us to finally breathe. But instead, it built a wall. I should have seen it coming. Little signs over the years whispered the truth. The way Emily rolled her eyes when I brought out the photo album saying, "Mom, no one cares about old pictures." The way she bragged about her friends' expensive vacations. The way she once said, "I don't want to end up like you, tired and poor." Each time, I swallowed the sting, convincing myself she was just young and careless. The day she graduated from college, I remember standing in the crowd, holding my little camera, tears blurring my vision. She was the first in our family to earn a degree. She looked radiant in her cap and gown, and I thought everything was worth it. But after the ceremony, she walked past me quickly to hug her friends' parents, the ones who drove luxury cars and wore tailored suits. My old dress and sensible shoes seemed invisible in her eyes. Still, I held on to hope. I believed the inheritance would soften her, that the security of wealth would make her generous. Instead, it hardened her heart. She became someone I barely recognized, someone who looked at me not as the mother who had sacrificed everything, but as a burden in the way of her new life. Looking back, I realized money didn't change her overnight. It simply gave her permission to become the person she had been leaning toward all along. The reading of the will was held in a small office downtown, the kind with dusty blinds and shelves of leather-bound law books. I wore my best dress, the navy one I'd ironed the night before, and carried a handkerchief in my purse. I thought I would cry, but not for the reasons I eventually did. Emily sat beside me, her posture perfect, her lipstick a shade too bold for her 23 years. She seemed impatient, tapping her nails on the table as the lawyer adjusted his glasses. When he began, I braced myself, my mother's life summarized in a few dry sentences. Then came the words that split everything open. All assets, including the estate, investments, and savings, are bequeathed solely to Emily Johnson, granddaughter. I blinked. Solely? I asked quietly. The lawyer nodded. Yes, Mrs. Johnson. Everything passes to your daughter. Emily's lips curled into a smile. She didn't even glance at me. My throat tightened, but I forced a small nod. It's fine, I told myself. It's for her future. That's what matters. But my hopes shattered later that evening. I returned home, expecting to share a quiet dinner. Instead, I found my suitcase sitting on the porch, packed with my clothes. My old quilt was stuffed inside haphazardly, as though it were garbage. Emily stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. Emily, what's this? My voice shook. She didn't blink. You don't live here anymore, Mom. This house is mine now. My knees weakened. But it's our home. I raised you here. Her eyes narrowed. Correction. You raised me here. I'm an adult with money now. I deserve freedom. I don't need you anymore. The words sliced deeper than any knife. I stepped closer, trembling. Emily, please. This house carries our memories. Your grandmother's spirit is in these walls. Surely you can let me stay? She shook her head. I want a new life. You'll only hold me back. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the old house keys, cool and familiar against my palm. These keys have always been mine, I whispered, voice breaking. They've opened every door since the day you were born. Don't throw me out like a stranger, Emily smirked. Keep them if it makes you feel better. They won't open anything anymore. She snatched the keys from my hand and tossed them onto the porch, where they clattered against the wood. The sound echoed in my chest, hollow and final. Emily, I tried again, tears rising. I gave everything for you. I worked nights. I starved myself so you could eat. Don't you remember? Her reply was cold as stone. I remember, but that was your choice. Now I choose differently. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to force her to see the woman who had carried her through every storm. Instead, I stood frozen as she shut the door in my face. The click of the lock was the cruelest sound I had ever heard. The porch light flickered above me, buzzing like a fly. I bent down and picked up the keys, holding them tight, even though they meant nothing now. My suitcase felt heavier than ever as I dragged it down the steps. At the end of the walkway, I paused. Through the window, I saw Emily pacing with her phone pressed to her ear, already talking about renovations, parties, a new life built on money she didn't earn. Her laughter floated out faintly, careless and sharp. I clutched my suitcase handle and the photo album I had tucked under my arm, the only thing she hadn't touched. The album felt like a heartbeat against my chest, the last piece of us I could still claim. That night, I walked away from the only home I had ever known, carrying nothing but clothes, old pictures, and a heart cracked open. The room I rented was no bigger than a storage closet. The paint on the walls peeled like dry skin, and the radiator clanged every night as if angry at being alive. The mattress sagged in the middle, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall. It was a far cry from the home I had built with love, yet it was all I could afford. I laid my suitcase in the corner and placed my family photo album on the nightstand, as if its presence might make the space less empty. Some nights, I stared at those pictures for hours. Emily in her kindergarten dress, Emily with braces, grinning wide. Emily holding her college diploma. In every image, her smile seemed genuine. I wondered when it had hardened into something else. Betrayal is a peculiar ache. It makes you question not only the present, but every memory that led to it. Meanwhile, Emily's new life blossomed in public view. Within days, her social media accounts overflowed with photographs, shopping bags stacked on designer tables, champagne glasses clinking, luxury cars parked in the driveway. She wore dresses that cost more than I made in a month and posed with friends who had never set foot in our neighborhood before. At first, I told myself to be happy for her. She was young, excited, tasting freedom. But then whispers began to drift through the town like smoke. At the grocery store, I overheard two women near the produce aisle. "She bought a sports car last week," one said. "Paid cash." The other replied, "She's talking about investing in some nightclub downtown. With who, I don't know." "At church, Mrs. Church, Mrs. Church." Parker shook her head. "That girl's burning money faster than a fireplace. Folks are lining up to take advantage." Each comment was a needle in my chest. I wanted to defend Emily, to tell them she was just learning, that she'd grow wiser. But deep down, I knew they were right. I had seen the look in her eyes before, the same hunger that once lingered on her classmates' shiny shoes. Now she could feed it without restraint. One evening, I passed by the old house, my house, and noticed a stranger's car in the driveway. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows. Inside, through the curtains, I glimpsed Emily laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, handsome in a polished way, his hand resting too easily on her shoulder. Something about him unsettled me, the sharpness of his smile, the way he scanned the room as though measuring it. Later, I learned his name was Adrian. He was older than Emily, dressed in suits that screamed money, but no one knew exactly what he did. Some said real estate, others whispered investments. All I saw was a predator circling his prey. The gossip grew louder. "She's signing papers left and right," one neighbor told me. "Does she even read them?" another added. "He's got her wrapped around his finger." That boyfriend of hers is trouble. One day, at the small diner where I sometimes treated myself to coffee, I noticed a stack of papers left carelessly on the counterbank forms, property deeds, contracts with signatures scrawled hastily at the bottom. My heart froze when I saw Emily's handwriting. She had signed things she couldn't possibly understand. I traced my finger over her name, the ink fresh and bold. These papers weren't just meaningless pages, they were doors, and once unlocked, they could strip her of everything. I folded my hands together tightly, fighting the urge to storm back to the house and demand answers. But what authority did I have now? She had made it clear I was no longer welcome. At night, lying on the sagging mattress, I thought about my mother. She had worked her entire life to build that fortune, penny by penny, and now it was being tossed into the wind. I imagined her shaking her head, whispering, "Maggie, protect her. Protect what I gave her." But how could I, when my own daughter saw me as the enemy? Emily's world spun faster, and I could only watch from the outside. I saw her stumble out of expensive restaurants with Adrian's arm around her waist. I heard rumors of parties that lasted until dawn. People who had never spoken to her before now clung to her side, their laughter dripping with flattery. And through it all, Adrian hovered like a shadow. He drove her new cars, answered her phone, even escorted her to the bank. More than once, I saw him with papers tucked under his arm and Emily following blindly, her smile bright, her trust absolute. The tension inside me coiled tighter each day. Part of me wanted to march up to her door, bang on it with the old keys still in my pocket, and shout the truth, that she was being used, that money couldn't buy loyalty, that she was walking straight into ruin. But another part of me stayed silent, beaten down by her rejection. I told myself, she has to learn on her own. Maybe pain is the only teacher left. Still, the silence gnawed at me. I carried the knowledge of those papers, of that man, of the dangers circling her, and it felt like a secret burning holes in my chest. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. I walked the streets at night just to tire myself out, whispering prayers that somehow Emily would see through the smoke before it was too late. But deep in my heart, I knew disaster was already on its way. The first whispers came at the post office. I was standing in line when two men behind me spoke in hushed tones. "That Johnson girl's in over her head," one said. "Word is, she signed something she shouldn't have." The other chuckled. 10 million doesn't last long if you give it to the wrong hands. My stomach turned. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help it. They weren't just talking about some stranger. They were talking about my daughter. Later that week, I visited the diner again. The waitress, kind-hearted but blunt, leaned close as she poured my coffee. "Maggie, I don't mean to pry, but Emily's been in here with that man of hers. He orders for her, signs checks, acts like the money's his. I hope she knows what she's doing." I nodded weakly, though dread churned inside me. I remembered the bank papers I'd seen, her hasty signature, the gleam in Adrian's eyes. The gossip became impossible to ignore. One afternoon, as I walked past the courthouse, I overheard two clerks speaking near the steps. "That boyfriend had her sign a transfer agreement," one whispered. "He moved most of her accounts under his control." The other shook her head. "She'll regret that. By the time she realizes, it'll be gone." I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my pulse pounding in my ears. Transfer agreement. The words felt like a blade. My daughter, blinded by charm, had handed her fortune to a stranger. That evening, I gathered my courage and went to see her. She opened the door, looking dazzling in a silk dress that shimmered under the porch light. On her finger gleamed a new ring, a diamond so large it looked almost absurd. She held it out proudly. "Do you see this, Mom?" she said, her voice sweet but edged with triumph. "Adrian gave it to me. Proof that he loves me." I stared at the ring, my heart sinking. To her, it was romance. To me, it was evidence. Men like Adrian didn't buy rings with their own money. They bought them with someone else's. Likely hers. "Emily," I whispered, "he's using you. That ring isn't love, it's control. I've heard the talk. You've signed documents you don't understand. You've given him power over everything." Her smile vanished, replaced by a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You're jealous," she snapped. "You've never had money, never had a man who treated you like a queen. You can't stand to see me happy." I reached for her arm, desperate. "I don't care about the money. I care about you. Please, don't trust him blindly." She yanked away. "Enough. You're bitter because Grandma chose me, not you. Admit it. You wish it was you living this life." "But it's mine, Mom. Mine." And tears burned my eyes. "Emily, I only want to protect you." She stepped back, her ring catching the light like a warning signal. "I don't need your protection." "I don't need you." And with that, she shut the door, leaving me on the porch once more. I stood there in the night, the cool air stinging my face. The old keys pressed against my palm inside my pocket, heavy and useless. Across town, people were already whispering that Emily's money wasn't safe, that Adrian was pulling every string. And my daughter, my only child, looked at me as though I were the enemy. The ring sparkled in my memory, not as a symbol of love, but as a lock. And Adrian held the only key. The unraveling began quietly, almost invisible at first. A few weeks after Emily flaunted her new ring, I walked past her driveway and noticed the sports car was gone. In its place sat an older sedan. I thought maybe she had simply changed her taste, but the truth whispered soon after. At the grocery store, the same women who once gossiped about Emily's wealth now smirked. "Repo truck came this morning," one said. "Took that flashy car right off the lawn." The other chuckled. Gas money slips through fingers faster than water. Soon, the whispers grew into stories, credit card companies calling at all hours, banks refusing transfers, checks bouncing. It didn't take long before her glossy lifestyle cracked wide open. I heard it myself one afternoon when I walked past the house. The windows were open, and Emily's voice carried through the air, sharp and desperate. "What do you mean insufficient funds?" she screamed into the phone. I froze on the sidewalk as silence followed, then a crash, something thrown against the wall. That night, I saw men in suits leaving her porch, briefcases in hand, their expressions stern. Emily stood in the doorway, pale, her perfect hair tangled. For the first time, she didn't look like a queen. She looked like a girl lost in a storm she didn't understand. Part of me ached to rush forward, to hold her, to tell her I'd fix it somehow. But I stayed rooted where I stood. My dignity had already been trampled once. She had made her choice, and I was still exiled. Days turned into weeks, and the changes became impossible to ignore. The furniture delivery trucks that once brought in chandeliers and velvet couches now came to take them back. Neighbors watched as items were carried out, gold-framed mirrors, leather chairs, even the grand piano that had never been played. The same crowd that once admired Emily's wealth now shook their heads. Her so-called friends disappeared too. The glamorous women who filled her house for parties stopped coming once the champagne ran dry. The men who smiled at Adrian's side melted away when the bills arrived. By the end of the month, only shadows lingered around the house. One evening, I found a set of papers blowing across my shabby street, caught in the wind. I bent to gather them and froze when I saw the heading, Property Deed Agreement. Emily's name was scribbled at the bottom, alongside Adrian's. My hands trembled as I read the fine print. She had unknowingly signed the house into his control. The home that had been our foundation, my mother's gift, my years of labor, was on the edge of being stolen. I pressed the papers to my chest, my heart racing. It was as if fate had tossed them into my path, demanding I face the truth. Adrian hadn't just drained her accounts, he was taking the house too. The next day, I gathered every ounce of courage I had left and went to the house. The porch light flickered, the same one that had shone on the night she threw me out. My hand shook as I knocked. Emily opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed, her once glossy hair limp. "What do you want?" she snapped, though her voice lacked its old strength. I held up the deed papers. "Emily, do you understand what you've signed? He's taking everything. Even the house." She snatched the papers, her hands trembling. Adrian explained it. "It's just temporary." "No," I whispered, fighting tears. "It's not. You're losing everything. Please, let me help you." "Let me," her face hardened. "I told you before." "I don't need you. Leave me alone." The door slammed again, harder this time, rattling the frame. I stood on the porch, the sound ringing in my ears. My fingers curled around the useless keys still buried in my pocket. I wanted to scream, to pound on the door until she listened, but I knew it wouldn't matter. As I walked home, thunder rumbled in the distance. By the time I reached my rented room, lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the cracked walls. I sat by the window, watching the storm rage outside, feeling its fury mirrored in my chest. Rain lashed the glass, just as chaos lashed Emily's life. I whispered into the night, "Please God, don't let her drown in this storm." But deep down, I knew she already was. The day everything shattered began like any other, until it didn't. I woke to pounding on my thin apartment door, the sound frantic, almost wild. My heart leapt into my throat as I shuffled from bed, still in my nightgown. When I opened the door, there she was. Emily. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair tangled, her clothes no longer designer but wrinkled and plain. She clutched a crumpled notice in her hand, the paper shaking. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, her voice breaking, "Mom, please, I need you." I froze. Those words I'd begged to hear weeks ago, stabbed me deeper than any insult she had thrown. I let her in, and she collapsed onto my shabby sofa, burying her face in her hands. Between sobs, the story spilled out. Adrian was gone. Vanished overnight with nearly every cent of the inheritance. The accounts were drained, the cars repossessed, the jewelry pawned. And now the house my mother had once promised would always be our safe haven, was days away from being repossessed. I thought he loved me, she choked. I thought he cared, but he just used me. For a moment, I wanted to wrap her in my arms and tell her it would be okay. But something inside me hardened. I remembered the suitcase on the porch. The words she had spit at me. You don't live here anymore. I remembered standing in the rain with only a photo album in my hands. So instead, I sat across from her, my voice steady but cold. And now you come to me. Her head shot up, eyes red. I didn't know who else to turn to. Everyone's gone. The banks, the lawyers, the so-called friends, they've all left me. You're the only one I have. A bitter laugh escaped me. The only one you have? Emily, I was always the only one you had. I worked 2 jobs to keep food on our table. I wore the same coat for 10 winters so you could have a prom dress. I gave up everything for you, and the moment you had money, you threw me out like garbage. Her lip trembled. I was stupid. I thought I didn't need you. But now, please, Mom, I can't lose the house. It's all I have left. We sat in silence, the weight of years pressing between us. Finally, I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed against the cold metal I had carried all this time. Slowly, I pulled out the old house keys, the very ones she had thrown back at me in scorn. I laid them on the table between us. Her eyes widened, filling with fresh tears. She reached out to touch them, her hand trembling. You kept them? I never stopped keeping them, I whispered, because that house isn't just walls and furniture. It's where I rocked you to sleep when you were sick. It's where we lit candles when the power went out and sang to keep warm. It's where your grandmother left us her legacy. You think it belongs only to you, but it doesn't. It belongs to the family. Emily shook her head, sobbing, but it's too late. The papers. Adrian made me sign everything. It's gone, Mom. I leaned back, watching her crumble. And then, slowly, I reached for the worn folder I had hidden for months. I laid it beside the keys. Her tear-streaked face lifted, confusion flashing in her eyes. What's that? The safety net your grandmother left, I said softly. You never knew, because she told me in confidence. A separate legal claim, investments, property set aside in my name, not yours. She feared that if you ever inherited too much too soon, you might not be ready. I safeguarded it quietly, waiting for the day it might be needed. And Emily, I paused, my voice breaking, that day is now. Her mouth fell open. You mean, we're not completely ruined? No, I said, my tone firm. But listen to me, Emily. This money is not for parties, or cars, or men who whisper lies in your ear. It's not for greed or vanity. It is for us, for the legacy of your grandmother, for the roof over our heads, for the family name that has survived every storm. If I step in, it will not be for you. It will be for what we are supposed to stand for. She buried her face in her hands again, sobbing harder. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve you. For the first time in years, I felt my heart soften. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Maybe you don't, but family isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we do when everything falls apart. I can't erase what you did to me, Emily. I can't forget it. But I also can't let our family's legacy be destroyed. The room fell silent except for her crying. I squeezed her hand once more, then pulled it back. Tomorrow, I said firmly, we go to the lawyer. We fight for the house. We protect what is left. But after that, Emily, you will have to decide who you want to be. A woman who lets greed define her, or a daughter who finally understands what matters. She nodded through tears, clutching the keys and the folder as though they were lifelines. As I watched her, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since the betrayal, I wasn't just a discarded mother. I was the keeper of our family's legacy. And no matter how stormy the road ahead, I knew one thing: I would not let us drown. The following morning, I walked into the lawyer's office with Emily at my side. She looked like a shadow of the woman who had once draped herself in silk gowns and diamond bracelets. Her eyes were downcast, her movements small, like a child who finally realized she had wandered too far into darkness. I sat tall, the folder of documents on my lap, the weight of my mother's foresight grounding me. The lawyer explained the legal claim I had safeguarded, confirming what I already knew: the house and certain investments could be secured in my name. At that moment, I made my decision. "I'll protect the estate," I said firmly, "but on my terms." Emily lifted her head, eyes brimming with both hope and shame. "Anything, Mom, I'll do anything." I studied her face, searching for arrogance, for the sharp cruelty she once wore like perfume. But instead, I saw a girl stripped bare, humbled by loss. "Then here are my terms," I said slowly. "You will not touch this money without accountability. You will get a job, any job. You will attend counseling, and you will live simply, without chasing every empty promise of wealth. If you want me to stand beside you, you will have to prove you can stand on your own." Her lips trembled. For a long moment, I thought she might argue. But then she nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll do it. I don't want to be that person anymore." Later that week, back at the house, we walked through the familiar halls together. Dust lined the corners. Furniture had been tagged for repossession, but to me, it was still home. On the old wooden coffee table lay the family photo album I had clung to when she cast me out. Emily picked it up hesitantly, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the pages. There we were, her 5th birthday, frosting smeared across her cheeks, the night she graduated high school, my arms wrapped around her shoulders, Christmas mornings with paper crowns from the cracker boxes. Tears slipped silently down her face as she traced the images. "I forgot," she whispered. I forgot what mattered. I placed a hand on her back, not in full forgiveness, but as a quiet reminder that love, though bruised, still lingered. "This," I said, pointing to a photograph of the 3 generations, my mother, myself, and Emily, "is why we fight to protect this house. It isn't about money, it's about us." News of Adrian's betrayal soon spread through town. He hadn't vanished as cleanly as he'd hoped. Investigations opened, charges followed. I read the reports with a strange calmness, knowing justice would take care of him in ways I no longer needed to. Meanwhile, Emily faced the community she had once tried to dazzle. People whispered, some pitied, some sneered. But I noticed something else too, quiet nods of respect toward me. Neighbors who had seen me pushed out now saw me walk back in with dignity intact. The woman who had been discarded was the woman who now held the keys. I filed the papers to transfer the house officially into my name. For the first time in months, I exhaled fully. The roof was safe. Our legacy was safe. And so was I. One evening, Emily came into the kitchen where I was brewing tea. She was pale, her hair tied back simply, no jewels adorning her neck. She looked human again. "Mom," she said softly, "I started looking for work today, just part-time at a bookstore, but it's something." I smiled faintly, pouring her a cup of tea. "That's a start." She took the cup, her hands wrapped around it like a lifeline. After a pause, she added, "Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on you." I looked at her carefully. "I didn't do this for you, Emily. I did this for our family. But maybe, along the way, you'll learn to do the same." She nodded, tears filling her eyes again. And for the first time since the storm began, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for riches, not for status, but for healing. Because in the end, dignity isn't given, it's reclaimed. And as I stood in the kitchen of the house I had fought so hard to keep, I knew I had reclaimed mine. When I look back on everything that happened, one truth rises above the rest. Money reveals hearts, but dignity is priceless. I once believed $10 million could buy security, a future, maybe even happiness. But I learned it can also tear open the deepest cracks in a family. Emily's betrayal cut me to the bone, yet it wasn't just about the house or the inheritance. It was about trust, about love, about how easily we forget the sacrifices that brought us where we are. Wealth may dazzle, but it also blinds, and in her blindness, she almost lost everything. Today, the house stands firm again, not because of money, but because of choices rooted in love and strength. The photo album rests on the coffee table, and when I hold the keys in my hand, I no longer feel loss. I feel peace. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: never let wealth destroy the bonds of family, and never trade your dignity for someone else's greed. I know some of you watching might see yourselves in me, or even in Emily. Maybe you've been betrayed, or maybe you've been tempted. Either way, I want to ask you this: what would you have done if your own child betrayed you? Would you forgive, or would you walk away? Leave me your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your heart.